Financial wellness. Reach out to them for advice at 855-DON-GINO. And now back to your hosts, Don Getling and Gino Franti.
I'm going to tell you right now, and we bring Lisa in here, and she's going to go over something we haven't gone over before, and that's probate. And there's very important, especially with our aging population and our parents and so forth. This is something you really have to understand because you don't know what you don't know. Trust us. When you meet with Lisa, you go, oh, shoot. I should have done my trust a million years ago because I didn't think of that. Didn't know about that. Should have thought about that. We need to think about that. We need to adjust that.
All these ands and ors and ifs. And actually, let's talk about a what if real quick, right? Mm-hmm. So we just finished doing our personal trust. And, we talk about how do you want your children cared for in the event that you pass away, right? It's a really tough question. And so, we talked about the pot of money, right? And that was, I thought, a really interesting piece that a lot of people wouldn't think about. If somebody has to take care of your children and they have a limited amount of funds, how are they to distribute those funds? And if you just say, well, equally, sounds right, it sounds fair, it sounds that you want to distribute it equally. Well, what if one of them already had, and this was your example, what if one of them had already had a college education? And now you still take the funds and you distribute them equally. Actually, the one who actually already had the college education ended up getting more.
Yep.
So you
I
should
didn't even
just
think about that.
Again, it's a huge issue with people who have children because when you're raising children, I'm a mother, and when I raise my kids, I don't pay attention. I'm not like, oh, I spent $300 on Maddie, and I didn't spend any on Colin. I owe Colin money. We don't do that as parents.
Of course not.
And so if God forbid, somebody else was raising our children, we would want them to raise our children the way that we would. I'm not only in the loving context, but also in the financial context. And you're right. One of the examples that I often give has to do with when most people don't have twins, although there are a lot of people who do. But if you don't have twins, you may have a child who started college right at 18, maybe went to a 4-year university, and you might have a child that's exactly 4 years younger. And the example I brought to you was, or you, in the case of you have 3 children, when one of them may have already finished or maybe in the process at, let's say, Harvard, you're just paying for it. You're not saying, oh, but I got to reserve that amount of money for my other 2 children. You're just going to pay for each of their college educations, whatever it costs you. But if you passed away, God forbid, at that moment, and then we split the funds, it would be totally unfair because that child's share would actually be, it would be greatly diminished, especially if you think about the Harvard, or the Pepperdine.
You don't very optimistic of her,
Have you met my kids?
Cal State Northridge is looking good.
But
and nothing wrong with that. I went there.
Exactly. But that's why we really go through these. And it's funny because people who have minors often feel like, oh, well, I'm not going to die. I don't need to worry about this. But what if you do? And it happens. People die. Unfortunately, I hate to admit this, but I've had a number of clients who've had husbands who, and in my case, it was all husbands that died prematurely. And they've been left holding, the wives have been left holding the pieces. But what if something, God forbid, happened to those wives? These things need to be thought of, considered.
Yeah, we just had a person, part of our company, 32 years old, no health complications at all, just died died in her sleep. Aneurysm, just see ya. Yep. Two young children, just out of the blue. It's awful. And no, like you said, no foul play. She's on her computer, and they just went in. She passed away.
Oh, my
32
gosh.
years old. Not to scare anybody, but the point is stuff happens. We've all heard about it. Guarantee you see it on the social media. I don't know if I get one more GoFundMe, it's going to break my heart. Because, I mean, literally, we got a cut. You're like, no, we just paid for that one. We just donated to that.
I'm like, no, that's a different one.
Different one yesterday,
wow.
yeah.
That's
so the bottom line is prepare yourself. And you bring up so many, many important things. If you really care about your family, you should be talking to Lisa Odom with McDowell Odom, LLP. They do a great job because they ask the right questions. You sit with us, and you just listen and talk and bring up ideas, and the breakout that you give us, it's a little painstaking at first because you're like, oh, I don't know. I didn't think about like our animals. Yeah. You don't even think about that stuff. You're just like, well, I guess they're just going to feed themselves.
I'm a bad human being. I didn't even care. I was like, whatever, animals.
But your wife will, as my wife will. My wife cares about your animals more than you do. So it's so important and I know we're going to still talk about the probate because that's an important factor, but we have to reiterate because you only come on, we can't get you on here enough. how important it is to really talk with you about trust.
Yeah, and I guess my point was, Lisa, that albeit that we talk about trusts as probate avoidance, there's so much more. I mean, there's instructions in there that say that I want to make sure my children have the opportunity to meet with their family members. There's just so much more inside the trust once you really get into it than probate avoidance.
Oh, yeah. Probate avoidance is just one of the significant factors, but it's not the factor. It's a conglomeration, and planning avoids chaos, you know.
I hate the chaos. So luckily, I made my dad get a trust, God forbid, because he passed away all of a sudden, literally in a day. And thank goodness I forced him. He wasn't going to do it. And it helped us out because all his plans were laid out, where I saw my stepsister's parents, they fought. The sisters stopped talking to each other. The money got divided. They had to get a turn. It was all ugly because it wasn't properly laid out. It wasn't a plan, which should be that person's plan, not yours.
Exactly. And unfortunately, if you don't have a plan and you go into a probate, which I know we're going to explain what a probate is in a minute, but if you go into a probate without a plan, the plan is set by the state. It's not even set by you. It's based on California's intestacy chart. It doesn't even necessarily flow the way you want it to. And it's certainly the protections that we talk about for your kids with respect to the money and, like, you know, the children's pot trust kinds of concepts. Those concepts aren't available once you get into a probate without any type of plan.
Yeah, so I don't know about you, but I don't want the state planning any of my anything as much as possible.
Yeah, you can rely on them doing the right thing.
Yeah, especially in California. We're a really good state.
Yeah, right. And they're going to do exactly what you want.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think so. Sure.
Yeah.
All right, so let's tee this up a little bit because we're about to go to a break. In our final section, you're going to want to pay attention to because it's going to be really good because we're going to have Lisa get in deep on probate, what that means, how to avoid it, and the pitfalls and positive things if you do prepare accordingly. Tee it up a little bit what we're going to talk about.
So we're going to basically talk about what a probate is and some of the pitfalls of probate and some of the benefits of probate. It's not all bad, but essentially just, you know, so the listener understands, a probate is basic because we often have people say, what's probate? It's actually the process by which your property gets transferred to your next of kin or your heirs or to your chosen beneficiaries through the court process. And that's because many of your assets you just can't walk into the bank and say, hey, my dad died. I'm going to take his bank account now. The bank's going to be like,
you're not that guy, right?
Yeah. I mean, of course, that would be fraught with fraud and all sorts of other issues. But there's actually a whole process by which the California has laid out how we can make this happen if you don't have a trust. And it's through the California court system, through the Superior Court system. And it's quite a process. It's expensive. The fees are based on some gross values of your estate.
All right, let's tease them with that because they don't know how expensive it can be by not preparing. And so stay tuned because Lisa Odom with McDowell Odom LLP, our chosen estate planner extraordinaire, is going to go in a little bit more detail about probate because all of us need to know more about this. So stay tuned and don't go away. You'll be sorry if you do.